Microsoft is using Chromium instead of the Edge HTML engine. Should that worry Google? Hey everyone, welcome to ProgrammingMadeEasy.com. My name is Steve, and today I thought I would talk a little bit about what's going on with Microsoft Edge browser. So a lot of you may be aware that Microsoft recently didn't really make an announcement. They kind of talked about it a little bit in some articles and some interviews and stuff about how they're actually going to basically throw away the Edge HTML engine that was running behind the Edge browser, and instead they're going to base it off of Chromium. So those of you who don't know, Chromium is kind of this open source version of the browser that actually Chrome has latched onto. Like Chrome is a version of the Chromium engine. So the Chromium engine is actually a full-fledged browser that you can go and actually get. It's an open source browser. And Google Chrome is a version of Chromium. Well, basically Microsoft is taking that same cue. They're going to take that Chromium browser and they're going to put their own basically skin and features and stuff on top of it. So they're kind of doing the same thing that Google Chrome is doing. And this is kind of seen as either good or bad, depends upon your perspective, whether you're a Google supporter or a Google Chrome supporter or a Microsoft Edge supporter, or if you hate Microsoft or if you hate Google, right? I mean, just kind of everybody has their own perspective on these things. But it is kind of fascinating to think for a moment about what the implications of this are. So one of the biggest fears right now is a consolidation of the power in terms of Google, right? So it's kind of this perception that Google is starting to acquire more power because of this, since there's no longer competition for a browser engine, right? The big competition is still probably Firefox. There's some Safari stuff going on there too. But like Google Chrome is the big name right now. It's by far the lion's share of the market. So having Edge basically take on the same driving engine, the same browser engine behind the scenes as what Google Chrome is, means that there's a consolidation and no more competition. But one thing that doesn't necessarily take into account is the fact that Chromium is open source. It is not something that is owned specifically by any particular entity, right? Google doesn't own it, Microsoft doesn't own it, Firefox doesn't own it. Nobody really owns Chromium. It's an open source project. So there's some good stuff and there's some bad stuff with that. It does mean that Microsoft is now going to want to kind of get involved a little bit with the development of Chromium. And that means, you know, again, some people think that's good, some people think that's bad. I think a lot of people, the same people who are worried about what's going to happen to GitHub, now that Microsoft has acquired GitHub, they probably have similar concerns now that now that Edge browser is going to be based upon Chromium. Microsoft is going to try to start to impart some of their influence on the development process, and they're going to start putting some resources towards the Chromium engine. And in a way, it's kind of like helping out a competitor, because when they start coming up with ways, when their developers at Microsoft are coming up with ways to improve the Chromium engine, not only are they helping to build the Edge browser, but they're also helping to build the Chrome browser, right? So there's kind of this, it's an interesting world we live in where cats and dogs are playing nicely together. And it's very strange, especially for somebody that's been in tech for as long as I have. Back, I remember the browser wars of the 90s between Netscape and Internet Explorer. So seeing this kind of latching on to open source that Microsoft has been doing, I think it's just another one of those steps that we've been seeing since Satya has taken over at Microsoft, where there's much more embracing of the open source community and trying to get more developers involved in the process of building applications for Microsoft to try to garner some of that support. Microsoft for a long time has been very closed off, and you have to be a Microsoft developer in doing Microsoft development in Microsoft programs, right? There hasn't really been this open source community around Microsoft until fairly recently. So this is, of course, making a lot of other people very leery of what are the interests of Microsoft. What is Microsoft trying to do? Because they're well known for basically stealing technology, right? Finding some sort of good thing and incorporating it into their own product. And that's kind of been the typical MO for Microsoft. They still kind of do it, but they're doing it much more openly. I think they're trying to be much more open about the products that they build and where they're going and what ventures they're heading off to. So with that in mind, there was this article that was the Bleeping Computer put out that I've got here up on the screen, written by Lawrence Abrams. And there's a lot in here I actually kind of disagree with. It's a pretty opinionated piece. There's some things I agree with, some things I don't agree with, but I thought I'd go ahead and read through it. So Microsoft leaked engine browser should make Google worried. So Microsoft's leaked Edge browser. So Edge is now going to be using that Chromium engine and the back end to render pages and some of the other stuff that's going on as far as like integration with the interface and stuff like that. So having Edge basically kind of like a new skin. You can kind of think of Edge as like this skin version of not really Google Chrome, but if you were to take Google Chrome and like replace all the special things that make it Google Chrome and replace them with Microsoft Edge interface, that's kind of what I think we're going to start to see, and maybe some different implementations of features and extensions and things like that that are more Edge specific. But overall, I think that there's going to be a positive influence on this. I think that this is actually a really good thing. Let me go ahead and start reading through a little bit some of this, and I'll point out what I think is going to be good. So over the weekend, a leaked build for the Chromium-based Edge browser has been released that is providing users with their first look at the upcoming browser from Microsoft. If you are currently using Chrome, the reports indicate that this Edge preview browser feels, performs, and has the same features. So again, like basically this is taking the Chromium browser, which is what Chrome is based off of, and since Edge is going to be essentially consuming or utilizing that same engine behind the scenes, it's going to look and feel and play much like Google Chrome. And that's what, that's what he's pointing out here, is it's going to feel and perform much like Google Chrome. Microsoft has been quiet regarding their upcoming Microsoft Edge Insider browser, but a slow trickle of leaks has provided a bit more information. With this leaked build, though, users get the first full look at the upcoming Edge browser, which from all reports feels like it has the best chance of putting a dent in Google Chrome's market share. Now, this is the first point of contention I would probably have with, I think his name was Lawrence. Yeah. So this is probably the first point of contention I would have with what Lawrence is saying here. I honestly don't think this is going to put any sort of dent in Google Chrome's market share. Okay. Behind the scenes, Edge is not really going to look any different. Right? I don't think the Edge is really going to look any different. It might have a few extra or additional features. One thing that I know that he mentions in here is that you're going to be able to start using some of the Chrome extensions in your Edge browser, which is pretty nice, right? That's pretty nifty. But by and large, I mean, if you're already a Chrome browser user, you're already kind of familiar with the interface. You like the interface. You've grown comfortable with it. It's where all your bookmarks and where all your favorites and everything are. Doing the port over to Edge may be an easy port, but why bother? Why even do it, right? Especially because you have like linked accounts, right? One of the nice things about Chrome is I can load it up on any browser, sign in under my Google account, and boom, I've got, everything that I have from one computer to the next is all the same. It even remembers my passwords from one computer to the next. So I don't even have to worry about remembering my password that I entered over on that computer. It still appears on this computer, even if I go to some other place. So that's kind of one of the nice things, or maybe it's a bad thing. It depends upon who you are. But it is kind of this nice feature about Chrome. And if you're switching over to Edge, maybe you'll still get that functionality, but it's kind of like, why even bother with the change? What's the point of changing? If you already like Google Chrome, it's already the product that you prefer. How is Edge going to take you away just simply because the underlying engine mechanism has changed, right? On the surface, most people, when they're using these programs, what they're using them for, or the way that they choose what they're picking, is because the interface looks good. Sometimes something technically will cause them to drop something. Like, I tried to load this page, it didn't work, so I loaded up another browser, and I never had a problem with that one. And that was kind of the reason why I think I went from Internet Explorer to doing Chrome a lot more, is because it seemed like more and more pages were loading properly with Chrome. So now there's essentially Microsoft Edge isn't really going to have that problem because it's going to be using the same engine that Chrome does. So the same, the pages are going to render just the same on Edge as they do in Chrome. So what exactly is really going to be pulling people away from Chrome? If Chrome is already working, there's nothing wrong with it. Why would people move away from it just to go to Edge, right? That's what I'm not quite understanding about what's being said here by Lawrence. Like, if I'm already a Chrome user, there's really nothing to draw me away from Chrome because it's what I'm familiar with. But conversely, it's the same thing with Edge. If I'm already an Edge browser user and I love Edge, why would I go to Chrome, right? It's kind of that same thing. There has to be something there that switches me over. And is the underlying internals, the development procedure of the back end really going to make the difference for me as the typical user? No, I mean, as a typical user, you have no idea what's going on the back end. All you know is that, hey, my page renders, right? And it either renders or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then I'm going to go look at another browser to go find this thing. Or it's either that or, again, the interface is something you prefer. You like the way the interface looks and it's easier to navigate and work with. That's really the only reason. Those are the only choices that users typically make or base their decisions upon, not how is this thing built on the back end, right? That's what developers care about, right? That's what developers care about. And that's kind of the point that I wanted to make next. If I'm a developer, this is a huge deal to me because one of the biggest problems in the web development community is building an application, a web application that works on all of the different major browsers, on Safari, on Firefox, on Chrome, on Internet Explorer, on Edge, on Opera. Like, we have to worry about all these different browsers and how they all look and how they all get rendered. This is basically consolidating that process into one engine that's going to be doing the rendering. So because of that, it's like simplifying from a developer's perspective, it's simplifying that process. It's one less browser I have to worry about how it looks, right? Because it's going to be the same Chromium backend that's going to be rendering my page. That's perfect. That's beautiful. That's exactly what I want as a developer. I want to be able to build one thing once and not have to worry about all these peripheral concerns from other browsers, right? So I think this is a really good thing as far as from the developer's perspective. This is a great thing. From the user's perspective, I don't think that there's going to be any significant difference here. The needle might move one tick one way or the other, but it's not going to be encroaching upon anyone's market share. I really just don't see that. So that's kind of where I have a difference of opinion here with Lawrence. While many people are concerned that Microsoft switching to Chromium could put all the control into Google's hands, when it comes to desktop operating systems, this may have the reverse effect. So the argument that Lawrence is making here is that, and he gets down into it here a little bit more, is basically if there's really no difference in the way things are rendering on the page, right? There's no problems loading up a page, even though all of the development decisions about the browser are kind of in Google's court, because Windows dominates the operating system market. And, by default, it loads up the Edge browser. If the Edge browser is just as good at loading up pages, why would anybody go and load Chrome on their computer, right? But again, I think this goes to what is everybody comfortable with. By now, pretty much everybody has a preference. Pretty much at this point, who's a new user? There aren't that many new users to this world that are trying to figure out which browser to go with, and therefore they're gonna just go with the simplest one that's easy to load. I think most of the people have already made up their choices, and if they haven't, then they're going to be asking their friends for advice on which one they use, right? And that's pretty much where it's going to get. There might be some people that do some research and say, oh, this one is better than that one based upon speed improvements or rendering or whatever. But for the most part, I think, again, this is not really going to change anything just because, Edge has been installed. in Windows 10, actually even before Windows 10, versions of Windows 8 came with Edge browser. So it's been one of those things that's been around for a pretty long time. And we really haven't seen the market share change over the course of time. Like, we didn't see with Windows 10 that a whole bunch of people decided to jump ship from Chrome into Edge, right? It just didn't really happen. And part of that is the reputation of Internet Explorer, right, as being kind of difficult to work with and kind of clunky. So I don't think that there was really ever a change in the market just because the Edge browser, even though Microsoft tried. And I got to give it to you, like, I got to give it to Microsoft. I think the Edge HTML browser engine was pretty good. Typically, I did find, in my personal opinion, this is totally anecdotal, it did seem like pages rendered a little bit faster in Edge than Chrome, and it also seems like it was a much less of a resource hog than Chrome is. Right? Chrome tends to be very resource intensive, and Edge was pretty clean on that. But now that they're switching to the Chromium engine, I think it's going to be about equal. So again, I don't really see, if anything, that right there alone, the performance of the browser might become an issue for anybody who has Edge, because now it's going to be a little bit slower than Edge was. Like, that was one of the key features of Edge, was it was a little bit faster and took up a fewer resources. And they're essentially giving up that edge. So I think it kind of counterbalances for those people who just like to have Internet Explorer loaded by default. I just don't see that this is really going to move the needle either way. Okay, as Windows dominates the desktop laptop OS market, and if Edge performs and offers the same features as Chrome, including full access to Chrome's extensions, many users may just use Edge instead. This could offer more control to Microsoft, who may be able to influence how the browser is developed and what new web standards are published. So these are 2 points that I've already kind of covered. Chrome extensions, being able to run Chrome extensions in the Edge browser. That could be very nice. Yeah, it would definitely be very nice. And then on top of that, you could also then bring in Edge, Edge extensions. So you could have a browser in Edge that has both the Google marketplace of Chrome extensions and the Edge marketplace of extensions. Both of them could run on your browser. That would be really nice, but I have a feeling that a bunch of those Chrome extensions will suddenly have some sort of mechanism on them that checks to see which browser you have before it operates. If that is the case, then you might run into some problems running those extensions in your Edge browser, and nothing really has changed. I think there's still going to be some of that, hedging of bets there. Some, putting some locks and some mechanisms in there to make sure that you aren't installing a extension under the wrong browser. And just kind of as a side note, I will mention, I think that this also means there's the potential that the Google Stadia that I talked about in an earlier video might also work under Edge. Maybe. I'm not saying we will get there, but that's a possibility, right? Anyway, so this could offer more control to Microsoft, who may be able to influence how the browser is developed and what new web standards are pushed. That is something that I would argue too. I do think that Microsoft, so I agree with Lawrence on this point. I think this does mean Microsoft, instead of competing against Chromium and Chrome, now they are going to be an influence on the development of that, because they're going to be using it, and they're going to have developers that are putting in like pull requests and stuff on this, and also being involved in the discussions around what new features need to be implemented into it. They're going to become suddenly kind of a big impact on that development process, that Microsoft is just going to be just as influential, and maybe even bring some of the good things that they might know about with Edge and some of the technology that they did, might be able to bring some of those good ideas and get them into Chromium. So I don't know, we might see some really good things happen as a result of that. Even though this may still not be a good thing for other browser developers such as Firefox or Opera, at least it could spread some of the control among multiple organizations. So I think this is basically saying, like, we've been separating out the market according to browsers, and browsers have typically been broken down according to companies, right? So Firefox is Mozilla. I forget who owns Opera. But then you had, Microsoft Edge. You still have the same separation of companies. It's just that which browser they're backing has changed. So you still have the same companies causing influence in the browser, the current browser wars. You still have the same companies influencing. It's just that this kind of shifts a little bit about the power structure of which companies are backing up which browsers and where those changes are going to occur. Some people might even say, well, with Microsoft coming in here, they might corrupt the whole process. I mean, that's possible. I don't think that's going to be the case, but there's a lot of different ways this could go at this point. And I think it's a little too early to start making these generalized predictions about who should be fearful until we start to see some actual development involved. Okay, take a look at the Microsoft Edge 75 browser. The leaked Edge build is based on Chromium 75 and has an internal version of 75.0.107.0, which is slightly behind Chromium's Canary version of 75.0.37440. When started, Edge will ask if you wish to import data such as favorites, autofill information, and history from Chrome, which really isn't any different. You've already had ways of bringing in data from off of Chrome into your Edge browser. It's already been a thing, and vice versa. Users who have tested the leaked build have also stated the browser performs really well when browsing the web, and that it is more than ready for public preview. And I just want to give a point of clarification here. Ready for public preview does not mean ready for public distribution. It just simply means it's ready for the public to kind of look at it and give feedback about it. It's also an opportunity for developers to see where the technology is going and start to build new extensions for it. That's a big deal, because whenever you have a new platform, you need developers to start to develop for that platform, right? You need to have them embrace that new technology and start to build for it, because any platform is worthless if you don't have developers building on it. It's just kind of the way it works. So having a public preview release means basically getting it out there that if you're part of the Microsoft Insider program, you can go get this public preview version of it, which a lot of you probably are. You may have just checked that little checkbox when you installed Windows 10. And it's in the settings if you want to go change it now. But you can go be a part of the Insider preview program and go get this public preview, give your feedback. Here's some things that are broken on it, or here's some additional features I would suggest. That's not really, it's not going to be something that's distributed with Windows 10 at that point. It's just out there in the public view so that there can be some feedback done on it and developers can start to develop for it because they know what's coming, right? Okay. So Microsoft has modified the layout of the browser to make it feel more like a Microsoft application. For example, the settings page have a left-hand navigation bar similar to other Windows 10 apps, which they do kind of give a screenshot here. This is the settings screen, which I kind of like the layout. This is, again, one of those things I think Microsoft does do very well nowadays, is kind of this clean interface. This left-hand navigation pane with details on the right, this master detail screen with the menu on the left. This is a very common layout that's very popular, very clean, and I'm kind of glad to see it in the Edge browser. It just kind of feels like you're just a part of Windows 10. It's just Edge browser is just an extension of Windows 10. It's not a bad idea, and it's really kind of the way that Apple works, right? Apple products are very, very popular because of the clean interface, because of the ease of use, because from one application to another, it still has the same flavor and feel to it, which helps the user experience, makes it less confusing. And that's kind of what Microsoft has been doing with Windows 10, is they've kind of followed that same idea. Let's keep things in a pretty simple general pattern, follow these same design techniques to help make it easy for the user so that they don't get lost in what's going on. Okay, Microsoft also included their own services into the browser. For example, Google Safe Browsing has been removed in favor of Microsoft Smart Screen. So that's just probably, you know, a service, right? It's a particular service. They probably wouldn't want to continue to let this service go through Google, because then that means Google has access, or Google has total control over this service that is being provided by Microsoft. That's just kind of like, you don't really want that. So it makes sense that they would replace certain elements, certain services that Google might currently be using with Chrome, and replace them with their own versions of it, right? Okay. Let's see. Edge supports Chrome extensions. In addition to setting up a dedicated Microsoft extension store, Edge also allows users to enable the installation of extensions for Chrome's web store. While they state that these extensions are unverified as a warning, and rightfully so with the Chrome web store's track record, it does provide an enormous pool of extensions that users can install right from release. So once again, I kind of have to disagree here with Lawrence. Well, let me put it this way. I don't know what track record he's talking about specifically. I don't know. Like, has there been some sort of major problem with Google Chrome's web store? I don't recall there being a track record issue with it. Is it a bit of a, you know, is it a bit of a free market there, right? With a lot of, like, you just pick whatever you want and anybody can develop for anything. Yeah, but what's wrong with that? I don't understand what's the track record here that he's referring to. I think that's a bit of a backhanded slap at Google. So I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that might be just kind of hyperbole on the part of the author, but you know, it's his article. He can write whatever he wants. But what I do take from this, which is something that I really like, is the fact that if you can do both, you know, some of the Chrome extensions and the Edge extensions, that's good. I mean, that basically, it's not going to double the marketplace, but it's going to basically expand it beyond what's just in Chrome. And that's good. You know, I always like having more open development for things. I like having this idea that a lot of different developers can contribute in lots of different ways. So for me, that's a pretty good thing. I like that idea. Now, whether or not Chrome and Chromium are going to allow this to continue, and that you can install Chrome Web Store apps into Edge, that's something that could certainly have the kibosh put on it. But maybe there's some sort of partnership or cooperation going on here as part of this. Maybe, for all we know, Microsoft might have gone to Google and said, hey, we're planning on doing this. We'd like to do this more as a cooperative effort, because they've been doing this on some other things, like Angular development, for example. It's a really good example. Angular is both a Google and Microsoft product. It's something they're co-working on. So this might just be another one of those things that they've gotten together and said, hey, you know, you scratch my back, I scratch yours, and let's not screw the public on this, right? Who knows? Maybe. Okay. New Edge-specific experimental flags. In addition to the normal features that come built into Chrome 75, Microsoft has also added their own experimental flags to the Edge flag screen. So yeah, I'm not going to go over all of these. There's some pretty decent ones. You can go through the article. I'll post a link to it in the description so you guys can go check it out and see what some of these other things are that get pointed out. But that's pretty much the end of the article. I'd love to hear what your guys' thoughts on this. Does the fact that Microsoft is switching over to the Chromium engine to run Edge browser, is that going to change your mind? Is that going to make you want to go to the Microsoft Edge browser if you've been using Chrome? Or does this mean exactly the opposite? Does this mean you've been using Edge and you feel kind of betrayed about this? You think it's going to run slower, the memory is probably going to get, you know, the resources are going to get overused, so maybe you'll think about switching to something like Firefox or you know, or Chrome, or I don't know, whatever, Dolphin browser, I don't know. There's a bunch of other ones out there that we could probably have a good long discussion about, because there's some security concerns, obviously, with Chrome and what they're doing. So there's a ton of options out there for browsers. There really are, and you're not really locked into any one of these. But there definitely is a consolidation effort going on here on the part of Microsoft, so that they can dedicate less development resources towards building something in competition, and instead they're just embracing this open source technology that's already very well vetted out, that the community is really strong behind. And from a business perspective, I think this totally makes sense on the part of Microsoft. why wouldn't you do this? Why would you continue to put resources to a losing battle, right? You're not going to win. You're not going to beat Chrome on this right now. So why bother? Maybe if Chrome starts to stumble, if they start to fall, they have some problems, maybe then you revive what's going on with Edge, or maybe you split away from the Chromium, or maybe you make your own version of it, the own version of the engine, and start building off of it. That's basically how Node came about. Google's V8 engine was basically cloned and then turned into Node. So there's a lot of products that do this, where they kind of take something that's a good idea and then just kind of split off and then become some whole other entity. And that could happen. That could happen in the future. This may just be a temporary thing by Microsoft. But I do really want to hear what you guys have to say. Are you guys going to be making the switch over to Edge and you've been using Chrome all this time, or are you going to do something else? Sorry, I had a little hair flying in front of my face. Are you going to switch to like Firefox now? Are you going to do something else? I mean, I'm really curious. What browser do you guys use? What are you guys planning on using? Is this really going to change your mind? Are there any browsers that you find really interesting and maybe you could share with the rest of the community that you think that are really good alternatives to either Edge or Chrome? I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say. So thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. I'd like to thank the members who have signed up for this channel. Samuel, and I apologize right away for how I'm going to pronounce your name, Niketisia Tabiri. Please send me a message on how to pronounce your name. I'd love to know that. I always hate when I'm mispronouncing names. For Technical, Kanan Krishnan, Rishi, SAA Consulting, Miss Kill 'em Softly. I love that name, Miss Kill 'em Softly, Mrs. Kill 'em Softly. And Olubayu Olasakan. I really appreciate all you guys contributing to the channel and being members. Don't forget, if you want to be a member, it's only $5 a month. You get 10% off in our Teespring store on off all of the merchandise that we have in there. You guys get direct access. You get a form that you can fill out and get direct access to ask me questions that I respond 100% of the time to. So I definitely go back and chat with you guys. And that's where if you guys are having an issue, a problem that you're encountering, you can ask me about a question going on with your application, and I respond back and try to help you out as best as I can. So not only do you get that, but you also get access to our membership Q&A sessions. So if you are a member, you get to ask me questions during those special Q&A sessions, unlike people who are just, watching the channel and viewing it. So if you guys are interested, again, all you have to do is just go to my channel, programmingmadeeasy.com. And if you go there, you just click on the join button. And from there, you guys can go ahead and sign up. So thank you so much, everybody who did sign up and are members. We really appreciate it. I love you guys. And I can't wait to see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.